Welcome everybody, this is Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors.
And this is Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors Group.
We'd like to welcome you to our K-12 Politics and Tech video series.
Our objective is to give you the absolute latest of what's going on in Sacramento that affects public school districts, obviously, and as well as all the technology stuff that's going on that's so vital to delivering for kids these days.
And remember, if you find these videos useful, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share out over social media. You're our marketing team. We appreciate your support, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, everybody. Welcome. Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors, back with another episode of K-12 Politics and Tech. As always, Kevin Gordon, co-host of the show, is here. Kevin, glad you're here this week.
Great to be here again.
Yeah, and let's get started with, there's some bipartisan efforts in Congress around special education and supporting special ed. Can you fill us in on the latest there, please?
Yeah, actually, Secretary Cardona went to Capitol Hill this week. And while he was on Capitol Hill, he got, a grilling, of course, from our, Republican friends and, probably a welcome, reception from folks on the Democrat side of the aisle. But amidst the conversation back and forth, what they were talking about was the president's proposed budget. And as everybody knows, he's proposing this incredibly large increase for special ed, probably the largest increase in a single year we've seen in maybe 20 years, maybe even more. But it's that $2.6 billion increase to special ed ended up getting, really surprise support from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. Tom Cole, who's a ranking member, appropriator in the Congress, basically said, we all know this is something we really do have to invest in. So it was nice to see that amongst a variety of issues that I think Republicans are going to take issue with in the very, very large spending plan that the president has put forward. And there's definitely not bipartisan agreement on the whole budget. On special ed investment, it's clear we've got Republicans and Democrats both on our side. So just really encouraging that way, that regardless of what happens in negotiations or where the president goes in his strategy to pass a budget, that the special ed piece, which is so important to us in schools all across the state, given the kind of cost that we have there, that there's big support. So I don't see that number getting any smaller. In fact, if anything, it could end up becoming a bigger number if Republicans were so enthusiastic about making sure that special ed was treated very well. They could make it a negotiating point in order to vote on other parts of the budget. They could see the special ed piece maybe even get bigger. Under the Clinton administration, I remember way back when we were really involved with some advocacy at that point, and President Clinton proposed no increase to special ed. And we asked, well, why are you not proposing an increase? And he said, because our Republican friends will do it and we'll say yes. But in terms of the bargaining dance that we do, we know they're going to ask for it and we are absolutely for it. We're just not putting it out in our version of the budget. So you get politics all the time. So it was very encouraging to hear what we did yesterday.
Well, glad to hear that, Kevin, and then please keep us posted there. Staying in DC, there's the FCC has been very busy lately in trying to solve the digital divide. We've been a little critical of them throughout the pandemic, but they started to step up. Actually, next week, we're going to see the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program go live. So if you have families that are low income or been impacted by the pandemic, they can receive $50 per month per household for internet as a subsidy. They can also receive, those families can also receive $100 for a device, towards a device to get online with. So please make sure you're informing your families and your communities of that. Again, that goes live on the 12th. We'll have the link to the article and also where you can go ahead and register in the email that goes out and underneath the video here in YouTube. Also, big news on Friday, Rosenworcel, she announced the details of her proposed plan for the $7.1 billion that was in the ARP to connect folks at home, leveraging the E-rate program, which traditionally has only worked on site for your school sites. This is groundbreaking. This is huge. It can help out right away. However, this is an 80-page document proposal. And Kevin, there's a process that goes on when the chairperson delivers a proposal like this. Can you just give us a little bit of the inside baseball of what the next steps are in turning that into reality?
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of unusual. Although Rosenworcel is just the acting chair of the FCC, there's a lot of sentiment out there that she ends up becoming the permanent chair of the FCC, just given her background, her expertise in this issue, and her real track record. But chairs of the FCC usually don't put that thing out, a proposal like this out in advance for sort of everybody to see. And then for the politics that ensues with the commission, which is a bipartisan commission. So, but one of the Republicans on the commission asked her, knowing that she was prepping this almost $72 billion plan, or I'm sorry, $7.2 billion plan, to get it out there so that we could start the debate about where it will end up, because it does have to get approval from the FCC. And Rosenworcel said, yeah, let's do it. So she did put that on Friday. It begins kind of the conversation. It reminds me of a process that we do in California on the state budget, where the governor puts his budget proposal out there. It doesn't mean that's going to pass as is. There's a lot of negotiation that takes place, but ultimately the commission, the FCC, will approve a plan and get it out the door. They are under time limits for both the package that you mentioned at the outset, that emergency package that's I think it's a $3.2 billion piece that you talked about. This 7.2, it's 7.12 per $1 billion plan. We have to have that package out and spent by school districts. It is time limited, so they do need to act quicker, and hopefully they'll get that done very, very soon.
Well, we'll keep everyone posted as more details arise. But again, the link to the $50 subsidy will be in the email and underneath the YouTube video. So please go ahead and click that. And again, socialize that with your communities. Make sure everyone's well aware. So staying on the topic of distance learning, Kevin, we talked a little bit about it last week, but some more news on distance learning and in-person instruction. Can you fill us in there, please?
Yeah, I mean, publicly, it hasn't been the issue of the week, but boy, I tell you, up at the state capitol, this is the issue of the week. Lots of conversation between staff, members of the legislature, on grappling with what will the future of distance learning look like as we go back to reopen schools in the fall. Um, what we're hearing from school districts all over the state is that we're going to need to be able to offer some level of distance learning to kids in families, particularly where there's multi-generational family members in a single household. There still is a lot of reticence about coming back full on, but there are other circumstances that may warrant a distance learning approach as well. And the law really didn't provide much for that outside of the independent study statutes that we have. So a lot of sort of focus on independent study has been going on. That's also been perpetuated by legislation that's really aimed at charter school reform that touches on independent study as well. They are separate issues, as the 1316, the bill, the AB 1316 by O'Donnell, doesn't go in effect till 22-23. It spurred a lot of conversation about what the governor might do, what the legislature might do, and the field wants to have answers sooner than later because they're planning right now. So the hope is that they do not upend the independent study statutes in a way that makes it impossible to use that as an effective means of achieving some distance learning this fall. But some of the debate is around, do we need sort of a third way? And that's all being hashed out right now. Our school district clients are entering sort of that debate by providing some input to policymakers at the Capitol building about what helps and what doesn't. We know that on independent study, for example, it's a very bureaucratic kind of process, and it could be streamlined at all for school districts would be really helpful. But at the same time, the legislature is more interested in not doing a lot of distance learning. Let's get kids back in class where educational exchange can be more meaningful, at least in their view. They have a real strong sentiment about that. But there's balance on both sides, and we'll see where this ends up. There really is an interest in some level of accountability that's higher than what they perceive to be the case without some sort of legislative intervention. So that debate is playing out. We actually are expecting, when the governor's May revision comes out a week from now, that in it will probably be some tweaks to independent study. We have yet to know exactly what that looks like, but we're waiting to see.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Kevin. And yeah, we're talking to superintendents in the last couple of weeks about what the summer and what the future looks like for them. distance learning isn't going anywhere, and they know that they have to adapt. And they're working hard to try to actually have something sustainable long term, because they know that they're going to have to rely on that to connect with students. So anyway, we'll look for more information there as it rises, and thanks for sharing that. Yeah, one of the big things that we talk about frequently is cybersecurity, and Biden's actually prepared an executive order that he's about to release. It's something that we talk about often on the show. It's just an example of how dire things are with cybersecurity as a risk to us all. And if you remember the SolarWinds attack up maybe a couple of months ago,
Right.
it had reached so many companies, and including our own federal government, and had gotten into so many nooks and crannies of our society. This is just something that we can't avoid anymore. So from DC, he's basically going to issue a new set of standards and perhaps create a new division of the government that's going to look after cybersecurity for us, and basically ask companies to behave a certain way if they want to do any business with any state or federal agency. So that could certainly impact how you end up working with some of your vendors and contractors. But just to keep in mind, if you haven't spent time on cybersecurity yet, we'll just say it again like a broken record, please spend some time, because it is a massive risk to your organization. And if you are hit with some sort of ransomware attack, you might be out for days, and that could have a big impact to your bottom line, as we've discussed in previous shows as well.
Well,
So
and let me
please,
just
Kevin, go ahead.
comment on it, Tim. You know, and we have talked about this before, and the reason why it's so serious is because now the California Department of Education is having to try to adjudicate appeals by school districts who are filing these J13 waivers because they got shut down as a result of cyber security attacks. And the department, kind of depending on your circumstances, has fallen down in a couple of different places. But one of their kind of growing disposition is that now we've known about it long enough that you ought to have a plan. And I liken it to sort of when I, you know, first got out of college and I had lots of bills to pay and I was trying to make ends meet on a really low entry level salary, is that, you know, you pay for just the stuff you absolutely need. And in a school district pre-COVID, a lot of school districts were cutting their budgets. So when people started talking about, you know, cybersecurity, number one, our entire platform for how we were running schools was not dependent upon technology at that time. And I think people looked at it like, well, I need some liability insurance if I'm going to drive my car, but I'm not going to get the whole array of insurance that I might need, even though that's the smarter thing to do because I can't afford it. I think school districts were looking at cybersecurity as kind of a luxury. Now it's an absolute necessity because what's happening is the disposition of the Department of Ed, and Rialto is such a great example of this, where they're coming down really hard on Rialto with the expectation that, hey, they should have had a plan in place. Well, Rialto was on the leading edge of trying to get distance learning, you know, achieved for its kids. And they were out there doing all the right things, and they got targeted really badly, no fault of their own. And to me, it begs for some sort of leniency, but it tells you the disposition of government about this is that we've got to focus on it. It's not fun to have an expense, whether it's insurance or other kinds of things that we deal with in public education. But cybersecurity is kind of should be looked at like an investment for insurance, that if you don't deal with it, you may end up having an attack that ends up costing the district a lot of money in lost ADA because you end up getting shut down, or in the impacts to your own technology system that you have to go in and fix. So it's a really compelling issue. And I mean, I know, Tim, it's a major area that you and your team at Digital Advisors help school districts with. So I just want to remind people, reach out to us, reach out to Tim in particular, because they can actually help navigate this for you about what are the fundamentals that you need, what's the least amount that you need to be doing at least, and then he can figure out what scaled up versions of that look like. But I thought I'd throw that out there, Tim.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward. If there's anything we can do, please let us know. I'll also say that there are some wonderful cybersecurity resources out there. You know, just if you haven't taken the time, at least launch some very basic professional development for your students and staff. It's one of the very simple things that you can do that really doesn't cost much other than your time. So we can give you more advice like that, but you know, please reach out if you need some help. We'd be happy to help you with that. So Kevin, let's move on to unemployment insurance. That's a debate that's been heating up. Can you fill us in there, please?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on this program as an issue that's kind of a surprise to districts across the state of this jacked up rate by the Employment Development Department with regard to the school employees fund, sustaining that, and what the amounts of money that we're going to have to be paying over what we have in the prior year. Um, Casbo and others have been real aggressive about this. Sarah Botches has been doing really good work in this area. We became aware of it as well. We actually raised it with the governor's office. They've been extremely responsive. So they've got the EDD and a whole group of stakeholders meeting this week on this issue. So we're going to have a conversation. I think there's going to be an hour or two that we're going to spend on it again next week, kind of dig into it a little bit. I think what we're going to be starting with is just trying to get on the same page with regard to what the facts are about it. And then we're going to start working on some solutions to this. We've definitely raised it to folks at the Capitol building in advance of the May revision. I'm not sure right away that they're going to look at mitigating this. I think the first issue is it legitimate? And if it's not legitimate, we don't expect those increases to stick. We would want them to potentially dial those back. Um, and if they make a case that they've got a legitimate reason why they've got these increases, which I can't imagine how they're going to justify it, but then it's an issue of how can we get the state legislature to help offset those increased costs to school districts while we're trying to do all this other stuff. So that's the latest. We'll definitely keep you guys posted on what happens with that.
Well, thanks for that, Kevin. And just want to say before we wrap up, the budget workshops that are hosted by your county offices of ed, the links to the registration for those will be in the email that goes out and underneath this YouTube video. If you haven't yet registered yourself and your team, please go ahead and do so. They're wonderful, basically budget workshops that will cover the May revise. And I want to say, Kevin, is that May 24th is when they start that week?
You got it. Yes. So the May revision budget workshop, as many of you know, sponsored by, all the major management groups, and the county office of ed in your county. And if you can't make the one that's for your county on that day, there's a different day that works. We certainly welcome you to, register for whatever one works. We're doing more than 30 of them. So we should be able to work into your schedule one way or the other. We also are keeping it at sort of this very low 1.5 hour threshold. So you can get basically really the essence of what you need to know. So that'll be helpful too. But looking forward to having all of you join us beginning on the 24th of May, and it'll go all week long. We're going to have workshops every day, probably 2 or 3 of them a day.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Kevin. I just want to say thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, please share this out to your friends and colleagues on social media. We do appreciate the support and hope you all have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tim. So thanks again for joining us for another week of this broadcast.
And I just want to take a moment to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and share this out over social media. Again, you're our marketing team. I'll also finish by saying, if you have some questions, please send them our way. We'd be happy to address them on a future broadcast. So with that, thanks everybody, and we'll talk soon.